First of all, a big welcome to everyone who's joined today. Thank you very much for your time. My name is Richard, as some of you may know. We have lots of customers here today. I am the CEO of Released, also the co-founder, and I'm really looking forward to taking you through our webinar today. Bit of housekeeping. So this should take about 20 minutes in total, so quite a quick one. We will be recording this, so we'll be sharing a recording afterwards, which hopefully you can circulate to those who couldn't make it. In terms of Q&A, we do invite questions. The way we're going to work this is there is a Q&A panel in Zoom. So as we're going, if you have any questions, do pop them in there. And then the team at the end is going to consolidate those questions. We're actually going to send around an email afterwards to answer those along with the recording. And do stick around to the end, because if you're interested in what you see here, we have a great offer, which we're going to share again at the end of the webinar. That being said, let's kick things off. So first thing is I want to pose a question for us to think about, which is how do you really prove that PR is actually working? And what do I mean when I say PR is working? So essentially what we do as an industry is quite unique in that we're able to take an audience with absolutely zero awareness of the thing we're promoting, whether that's a brand, a person, an event, an initiative, and take them along a well-crafted journey to any kind of desired outcome. And there's key milestones along the way, and we're kind of experts in navigating those. So I'm going to briefly touch on those. So as I said, we're able to take people from zero awareness, I've never heard of this thing, to awareness, I've heard of this thing, basic first step. But then once they've got awareness, we're really good at using things like key messages, spokesperson quotes, well-crafted narrative to give a proper understanding of actually who we are and what we're trying to communicate. So now we've got awareness, we understand what this thing is. But the next thing, which takes even more skill, is to build real emotional resonance, to give people a proper sentiment, a feeling of who we are, give them the right kind of perception. And then the last part, which is rarely talked about, but we think is crucial, is memorability. That's based on the fact that we all know intuitively that people generally aren't ready to take an action immediately after, say, reading a piece of coverage or seeing a social post. Maybe in 6 weeks' time, they're talking to their friend and the topic comes up. If you're in B2B, maybe in 6 months' time, there's a conversation in a boardroom and you need to be in that conversation. So if we take a step back, there's an awful lot of value here being created by PRs every day in agencies and in-house teams all around the world. I don't think that is really up for debate for any of us here. However, the problem is that communicating all of that value is really actually very hard. And I'm going to list out a few reasons why. And I'm sure, I'm in fact confident that every one of us here has experienced some or all of these. So firstly is we just know that clients and executives are unbelievably busy, and we might only have a brief moment of precious attention to communicate all of the value we deliver. You guys, goes without saying, are incredibly hardworking, very busy. Over the years we've been doing that, we've noticed that PR teams are getting busier and busier. Basic analytics. So too many agencies and in-house teams are still relying on showing pieces of coverage alongside really basic metrics like reach and coverage views. The problem with that is, if we refer to our previous model, that only really gets us up to awareness. It doesn't at all tackle understanding that kind of emotional impact, the memorability, and the final result. It falls way, way short. Far too much of the market is forced to rely on those outdated basic metrics. There's inaccuracy. So we all know about media monitoring tools. They're vital, but the problem is that they miss coverage. They include irrelevant coverage. So in terms of analytics, often it's a little bit of garbage in, garbage out. We're speaking to an agency today that's logging into multiple systems. They're sharing slide decks, PowerPoint decks, dashboards, coverage reports with every client. It's too much, especially in the context of how busy they are. We've got limited budgets, expertise, and time to deal with. There's the issue of subjectivity. So if you do your own evaluation, that's great, but it is not impartial. And finally, lack of professionalism in the context of creating really credible, slick, professional reports is an ongoing problem. So again, we'll all have experienced this. The problem with this is We are generating all of this incredibly valuable stuff, but we cannot communicating it. And that's one of the leading reasons that we hear about why budgets are cut. So it's a big, big problem. So we've actually been thinking about this for over 2 years now. We've been doing lots and lots of R&D, and we really think it was an opportunity to reimagine how the industry does PR reporting. And our aim really, the thing we've been thinking about is how can we enable any PR team, whether they're B2B, B2C, they've got limited budgets, time and resources, to really easily prove that PR is really working, whatever that means to them. So what we thought we'd do is use a real world example to kind of explain what we mean by this. So this is an actual campaign by a brand called Vita Coco. Some of you may have heard of this, some maybe not. So they have a rival, which is called Poppy, which is a soda drink. And Poppy spent a fortune on sending incredibly expensive, $25,000 each, vending machines to already wealthy and powerful influencers. Now, the smart PR team at Vita Coco said, we spot an opportunity here. And they did the exact opposite. They put the cheapest possible vending machine, it's barely a vending machine, it's more of a shelf, on the street and gave away tons of product. They PR'd that and positioning themselves as a consumer first brand, nimble, friendly, fun, and we're going to see how that worked out. So this is an example report that we created and released. It's all built through drag and drop, branding, etc. I should say that Vita Coco is not a client. We just really like this campaign. And so first of all, we're building a sense of the activity that happened with this introduction. You can see here when I say vending machine, I really meant it. Like so. So that kind of sets the scene. We've obviously got the media coverage as well with those still important metrics like reach and coverage views and social engagements. But what I want to talk about today is providing much more evidence that we're successfully moving our audience along that journey towards the ultimate end result. And that's the bit that's really, really lacking in many reports today. So the first milestone I talked about before was increasing brand awareness. So obviously we've visualized things like coverage views and reach and social engagements here. But I want to move on to things like mentions. So we're all familiar with mentions. Obviously, more mentions is good, generally speaking. Here we've got far more mentions than there were pieces of coverage that shows that our brand was mentioned many, many times. Prominence is built on the fact that it's generally better to be featured in a headline than buried in the bottom of a piece of coverage. That kind of just makes sense for most campaigns. So we're able to measure prominence here, and you can see that 83% of these articles featured our brand, Vita Coco, in the headline, which is great. And then we've got these visibility KPIs. Now, the ones I want to focus on here are these brand new attention metrics, which is an area we're really excited about. We're now able to estimate how many hours of attention coverage receives. And more importantly, we're introducing a new metric called attention cost equivalency. And yes, you're all thinking about AVE at this point. Attention cost equivalency, or ACE, is different. It's the amount of media spend, the ads budget you'd need to purchase this amount of attention. Now, this is going to throw up a lot of questions. So after I briefly covered this report, we're actually going to take a bit of a deep dive on attention measurement. So what we've done here is we provided evidence that we have successfully increased brand awareness. So let's move on to trying to build an understanding in our audience of what we stand for, what we're trying to communicate. And here you can see we're analyzing key message penetration. This is super, super easy to do. So all you would do is describe your key message here. So here we've got Vita Coco values everyday customers, not influencers like their rivals. Now, our system is trained to understand the essence of what you're trying to communicate. It knows that that will not appear necessarily even in the press release and very probably not in coverage. But if it detects that that kind of essence has been successfully communicated, then that will be tracked here. So you as PRs can say, okay, here's what we set out to communicate. And we've worked with these third-party influencers. We've spent no money, and they have successfully communicated those things to their audiences. And we've built trust and credibility in the process. Same goes for spokesperson quotes. Really hard to get sign off. Really exciting when you see them in coverage. They're essentially key messages in human form. We can detect those at scale, even if the quotes are split across coverage. We've got a summary of our metrics here that shows we have really successfully communicated the things we want to communicate, and we've really built a good understanding of who we are and what we're all about. Now let's talk about resonating with our audience, which is more about the emotional side of things. So I want to talk about sentiment briefly. So we're all familiar with sentiment, and the concept of sentiment is sound. We want to know the tone of the media coverage. However, the execution, we feel, is usually either poor or even damaging because it can be highly inaccurate. And the reason for that, sentiment is traditionally done on an article level. I'll give you an example. So we have a customer who is an internet security company, and their strategy is to position their founder as a trusted thought leader and expert. Unfortunately, all of the articles that get placed in are about scams, phishing, data leaks, etc. So sentiment is always negative. What our system does, it understands the specific thing you're promoting, the person, the entity, the campaign, and it does accurate sentiment on that specific entity. And here it is in action. So all of the coverage we've added to this report, which all of these analytics are based on, purely the coverage in this report, is positive. We compare that with Poppy, the rival, it paints a very different picture, and that contrast is stark. Now, if this was article level sentiment, they'd both be the same, and it would effectively not be anywhere near as useful. And then we're really excited to announce brand perception. So we are ex-PRs ourselves, so we understand that PR is often about reputation management. But ironically, there is no effective, quick, affordable way to benchmark a brand or a campaign's reputation. Well, now there is. So the way this works is we trained our system, which obviously absorbs and reads all the coverage, to put itself in the position of a completely unbiased reader with no preconceptions about your brand or the thing you're promoting, and it does not know your campaign objectives. So again, based purely on the coverage in a report, it gives you an accurate, impartial readout of how an average reader would perceive your brand. So let's look at Vita Coco, the brand in question here. Innovative, engaging, responsive, strategic, and consumer focus. I can imagine those are the exact words that the PR team was set out to achieve. Now, these are not keywords that appear in the coverage, just to be clear. This is not a word cloud. This is perception. Let's look at Poppy. Controversial, misunderstood, and my new favorite word, backlashed. Let's use that more often in PR, I think. So here we've got evidence that we've really struck a chord, that the sentiment has been positive, that we're positioning ourselves in exactly the way we want. We should be resonating with our audience. And the final part is about remaining top of mind, which again is absolutely critical. We'd like to introduce this analytic called brand recall. And it's really about how memorable and sticky you have made your campaign or initiative or whatever it is you're promoting. The higher, the better. So again, this is based on the premise that we want people to remember us in future when they're ready to act. And there's three kind of ingredients to this, and actually we've covered them already. So one is mentions. It's generally more memorable to get lots and lots of mentions versus one. Second is prominence. It's again more powerful, more memorable to be featured in the headline and at the bottom of an article. And the third is sentiment. We actually score sentiment out of 10, 10 being super duper positive. So again, you want to be as positive as possible to make that impact versus pretty neutral and forgettable. So we analyze that for every article, we combine it into an overall recall score, and you can see that the team have done really, really well here. So that covers kind of the main thrust of it, really. We also do a similar thing for social media. You can add TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, X. We get analytics. We show the interactive posts. And also we do some good analytical measurement as well in terms of where's your reach come from, where have your views come from, etc., which helps you get an idea of social media conversation. So let's move back to this. So finally, we've shown with this campaign, which was very, very, very low budget and merely one example of millions that are going on across the world today, that PR is unequivocally working. And if we really focus on presenting that work as visually and digestibly as possible, succinctly as possible, we can successfully communicate that as well, which is critical. So as a kind of thought experiment, let's use ourselves as guinea pigs and take a step back here and look at this process. At the beginning of this session, there were probably some of us who had never heard of Vita Coco before. Now we've looked at some editorial content and we all have a good awareness. We've heard of Vita Coco. That's the first step. We also have an understanding of what they're trying to communicate as well. So we're at the understanding level. And I feel it's resonated. It's a very positive campaign. It's positioned in a really fun way. It shows them as nimble, as consumer focused. And I think it's pretty memorable too. And I would wager that at some point in the next few weeks, one of us will be standing in front of a fridge in a supermarket. We'll see the Vita Coco brand, and we might even reach out and grab it. And now I made a promise to talk about measuring attention PR. So this is the final section, just a couple of minutes on this. It's been a bit of a hot topic since we announced it, and we've been demoing it for a few weeks. So I want to talk about something that's happening in other marketing disciplines, including advertising, in full awareness that advertising is different from PR, but it's very interesting. So in that industry, they are moving away. There's a big push to move away from measuring impressions and charging on impressions, which is essentially how many times an advert is served, to attention, which is how much it's seen, which, as you can see, is a much more valuable way of looking at things. Now, this shift is being enabled by technology, which is very cool and also a tiny bit creepy. But what it does is it essentially uses your camera to measure what you're looking at on screen. So if there's an ad served, it can track how many attentive seconds that ad has received. And this has enabled them to essentially create a rate card for attention for advertising for the first time ever, which is very interesting. I'll come back to this in a moment. So far, we've been talking about advertising, but really we have actually been talking about attention. And as Professor McNamara states here, accurately, without attention, there is no possibility of persuasion or influence. Thus, measurement of attention in PR is critical. I actually don't think that's particularly controversial. I'm sure many of you agree with that statement. So far, so good. Now, luckily, there's lots of studies online that show how much attention different types of editorial articles get based on factors like word count and other inputs, which we've used to generate our first metric, attention earned, which is essentially the amount of hours of attention that your coverage has earned. That's interesting, but what's more interesting is going back to that rate card. So we carefully selected a few of those ad types that are most pertinent. What that's enabled us to do is generate this metric, which again, we've called attention cost equivalency, or ACE. And it's simply the media spend you'd need, the ad budget you'd need to purchase that amount of attention using ads. Now, the interesting thing is that earned media requires no media spend at all. It's zero. That is essentially the unique superpower of PR. So we just feel this adds another new, fresh dimension to PR reporting and finally enables us to put AVE to bed, which is going to be the last slide. So we are firmly in the say no to AVE camp. However, we understand why it remains popular. It's because largely it's the only metric in PR that has a pound or dollar or euro sign in front of it. And that is very compelling given all of its flaws. But now we have a new metric and it's much more credible. I want to finally give you 4 differences between attention cost equivalency and AVE. Firstly, ACE, our new metric, uses a credible common denominator between the two disciplines, which is attention. We don't feel that is controversial at all. Without attention, there is no advertising, PR, or any other form of marketing. ACE relates to media buying costs. That's what the C is for, not resulting value. We're not claiming that this is the value of PR. We're simply saying, look, if you wanted to purchase this same amount of attention through ads, you're looking at this kind of cost. ACE is based on public, impartial data that is available to anyone. It will improve over time, and so will the metric itself. And finally, it does not rely on a random 3x multiplier because PR is better than advertising. PR is not better than advertising, it's different. So hopefully that describes what ACE is, why we're really excited about it, and how the fact that it is different from AVE and hopefully will signal the end of that metric. So thank you very much for taking the time and for your patience as we went through that. I know there was a lot to go through. And just before we end, I just want to let you know about a special offer. If what we've done, what we've shown here looks at all interesting, we'd like to make a special offer. So that would include a free trial of the full functionality, all of the analytics we've gone through and all of the other functionality. a free bespoke tailored best practice session to show how it would work for your specific team and your clients or your organization. And if you decide it does work for you, a significant early bird 12-month discount if you do decide to sign up, which there's no obligation to do. So to claim this, all you need to do is email hello@release.com with the code June30, and that will be available to the first 30 PR teams who do it. So once again, thank you very, very much for listening. If you do have any questions, do pop them into the Q&A section now before we wrap up. And again, the team will review those and collate them. And I want to say again, one more time, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to take you through this. I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye for now.